Artificial intelligence is transforming healthcare at a rapid pace. It supports healthcare professionals in their day-to-day work and some of the clinical decisions they make already. Ultimately, AI changes how healthcare is and will be delivered. Today, we will explore what this new reality means for pharma commercial organizations. Joining me is Tristan Theurier, the General Manager at Veeva in Asia Pacific. We will discuss how AI is reshaping healthcare and how pharmaceutical companies can successfully evolve their commercial models for this new era. Welcome to Amplifiz's podcast. We are very proud to be the #1 pharma and MedTech innovation podcast on YouTube. So thank you so very much for your support. And please make sure to subscribe if not done yet. It helps us tremendously. Hello, Tristan. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello, Guillaume. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
AI is empowering both patients and healthcare professionals, as I mentioned. So from your perspective, what are some of the biggest behavioral shifts?
You probably used AI already this morning at some point. I did. So throughout the day, you always do. And so patients, doctors are consumers as well. Mm-hmm. And so that's impacting them.
Right.
For patients, I think one thing is in the past, for example, they were Googling information. Maybe they were going to like specialized medicine websites to get information about some conditions they had.
Right.
Now they go to AI. ChatGPT even has a ChatGPT Health version now. So that is changing because they have more questions per year also for the doctors. Right. Now there are also two sides of the coin. There was a recent medical publication that showed that 50% of the AI generated answers to health questions were found problematic, and 20% of these answers were actually harmful.
Wow.
So you've got kind of these two sides, right? You've got more information, but with that more information, better access, you have also questions about the relevance in these cases, right? Mm. So that's for the patients. For the doctors, it's not about having access to more information. The problem doctors are facing, I believe, right now is they have access to too much information overload. And there is that concept called medical knowledge doubling time, which is how much time it takes to double the volume of information, medical knowledge. In the 80s, it was taking 7 years to double that medical knowledge. In 2010, it was taking 3.5 years. And you see where we're going. In 2020 now, the medical knowledge is doubling every 2 months.
Wow.
Every 2 months, you've got you double the medical knowledge. And so I was thinking about just like a medical officer going through the trainees. From the moment they start training, to just the moment they become associate consultants, just think about how many times the volume of information.
It's crazy.
And they are still just studying. So think about the doctors that are already practicing, right? So that's huge. And so what does that mean is AI is helping clearly in that case. Solutions like open evidence that is for doctors and that helps with medical search and clinical information. Have it's not about accessing information. It's about doing the triage. How do I get the essence of what I need? And I'm able to have complex questions as a practitioner where I can get the response. So that's a big shift, I believe. You have AI solutions that help them be more productive. You also have solutions that start doing part of their job. There was, for example, in the state of Utah in the USA, got recently the approval to get AI solutions to refill certain prescriptions without human intervention. For chronic diseases, of course, you've got a lot of guardrails. It's for certain class of medicines. Mm-hmm. But if you need to renew certain prescriptions, then AI can just generate that prescription. The last point maybe is science is getting more complex. If you think about just the history of medicine as, and I'm not a medical specialist, so I'll be careful about what I share. But just if you think about the history, a century ago, they were small molecules, so simple to manufacture, and they were solving kind of smaller problems like paracetamol, pretty much. Mm-hmm. In the 80s, you start seeing like what we call the large molecules, more complex to build and like more solving bigger problems. And in the last 20 years, we have more of what we call targeted therapies or precision medicine. And that's more like, it's not the chemotherapy you had before, but more like the sniper, like very specific therapies that will go deep and address one specific problem in the body. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is not only doctors have more information, they also have a more complex way to treat patients, right? Mm-hmm. That means personalization of treatments. You don't treat lung cancer anymore. You treat a very specific subtype of lung cancer. And so that means that you may have to combine drugs. You may have to switch treatments at some point. So that's kind of like where we're going, like AI. And so that's the technologies that is changing how patients, doctors think, act, and work together. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you've got this environment, this science that is moving at a super fast pace.
Right. But what are your takes on, what are the key pointers that pharma commercial leaders should really be mindful of?
AI is to some extent changing and forcing the industry to adapt. And the other side is it's pretty accelerating a trend that was there, right? Correct. It's not that it's just changing everything. Right. Sometimes it's accelerating. One example I have in mind is access to doctors, to HCPs. Mm-hmm. We've seen a decline over the last 15 years. This is something that at Veeva we kind of measure. And for example, in the USA, 70% of HCPs were accessible by the industry 15 years ago. 70%. Okay. And now we're down to 45%. Right.
And define accessible?
It's ability for the pharma industry to engage with the doctors. Most of the time, what that means is a rep meeting face-to-face, but that could be even like using different channels, like sending emails. Okay. So all that together is what we call access. Right. So 45% in the US, even lower in certain regions like APAC, for example. Okay. So you've got this big trend that is happening, and my guess is that it will amplify with AI of the access reducing. There's a bit of a question if a rep can meet a doctor 9 to 5, but now the doctor has access to open evidence at any point of time on my phone at 10 p.m. when I've got a question back from work. There's a question about whether there is an inadequation between the needs of the doctors and the model that is in place for the pharma industry. Now, I can give you a very specific example. I happen to be married to a doctor. So, so I've got some information. It does not represent the entire society of doctors. Let's be careful. But she was giving me a very specific example last week. She was like, hey, I met a rep and I had a very specific question. She's a hematologist, so it tends to be a bit more of specialty. So quickly you get into clinical and innovation. And the pharma rep did not have the ability to provide answers. So what the person says is like, hey, doctor, it's a good question. Let me introduce you to the MSL. And so that person will reach out to me. And the reaction of my wife was like, okay, great, but actually I'll get the response in 1 hour on my phone. Right.
By the time the introduction is made, I've already found what I was looking for. Of course.
And so that's the thing, like everyone is moving into like 24/7 accessibility to information. And maybe the old playbook of the role of the pharma rep to educate the doctors on innovation, on clinical trials that were not at the same pace. Yeah. Needs to change. And so that model probably does not work anymore. Okay.
That is very clear. The traditional rep-led face-to-face interaction, as you mentioned anyway, has been declining over the last 15 years. So it's nothing new, but AI is probably accelerating that evolution. So that's one element that is important. And now making that statement is one thing, but being able to identify what are some of the action items that needs to be taken out of it is another story altogether, right?
Maybe I can start with how I think about where we're going, before giving solutions. Is like, hey, where do I think we're going? Yeah. If I think about the new commercial model, I think there are 4 components there. There's still the field team, the digital, the content, and the agents. And agents is a new one, and so I can talk about it. I say field. I believe the number of sales reps will reduce over time, and we will see more of specialized roles. MSLs has been discussed for the last 10 years, but even more specialized roles as clinical experts. The way I see that, and it's maybe a simple analogy, is I do a parallel with the history of medicine that I shared earlier. Where we are today is more the large molecule. You still have like the sales reps, but you have also the MSLs, the market access team. And it's more a combination of that, but it's still very field-centric.
Right.
Targeted therapy means like personalization, precision. And I think that's where the industry, the commercial model should go to. How do we make sure that we personalize that information, that it's on demand when the doctors need that? And what does that mean to be very specific, very personalized? So I think it's kind of where we are going.
Right? I like the analogy, yeah.
And so part of it is the field team, yeah. Part of it is the agents. If we say the doctors go on open evidence now to get information, what do we need to think so that open evidence and other tools can get the relevant information from my drug, from my clinical trials, from my publications, right? And so a big thing, for example, that we hear a lot these days is GEO. Like, how do we optimize our content for AI solutions? The model is moving from the pharma industry influencing KOLs and HCPs to influencing the AI that is influencing KOL and HCPs, right?
Interesting.
And so there is a big thing about the influence and the GEO. Yeah.
Interesting. So GEO, generative engine optimization, as opposed to SEO, search engine optimization, of course. And I really love the idea of not directly influencing KOLs per se or HCPs at large, but going through that lens of AI where anyway they are going for information.
Because the content need to be ingested by both the human and the AI, the content we need to rethink how the content is designed. So there is a big thing behind, which is like, hey, what is our content strategy, right? And so that's a big change, because that's going to change completely the process. How do we get the content that can be easily absorbed by AI solutions and not just the cognitive mechanism of a human person, right? So that's a big thing. So you can influence, but to a certain extent, but you cannot control the narrative the way you used to in your previous model.
Of course, you're not creating a website page where you control the narrative. That's for sure. That's a big difference. Yeah.
But that's exactly, Guillaume, actually where I was getting to, the websites. I think we see something happening as well, which is revamping the brand websites and just to make them more relevant to the needs today. And so if you think about a doctor visiting a brand website in the past, you could probably see where they were clicking. And with that, you were trying to guess, or maybe some keywords, search words somewhere, and you were trying to guess actually why they came to your website, what were the questions, and you try to guess whether they got the response, but it was not clear. One big thing we see now is conversational AI on the brand website. So that's AI into the brand website. And actually, that's changing everything, because now you've got access to the full journey. What was the question? Why did the doctor came to my website? What did they want to achieve? Did they get the right response? And what we see actually is the brand websites using conversational AI get 38% more requests for a follow-up with a rep than brand websites without conversational AI.
Interesting.
So that means that, I think we still tend to think it's either digital or it's field rep, right? But what you can see is that actually it's the opposite now. It starts digitally, but if we are smart, if we have the right tools, then it triggers like a follow-up with a rep. But then the rep becomes maybe more demand triggered. It's less about, I'm going to meet Dr. Guillaume 5 times. Right. Now it's more like, hey, Dr. Guillaume will need me after visiting a website. So that's changing the dynamics as well. Not only the different categories you have in your commercial model, but the flow as well. Digital to rep, and not maybe instead of rep to digital that was in the past.
So earlier you touched on 4 main topics. And let's go back to the content aspect.
I think we talked about the responsiveness as a big change of AI. And I think that's also impacting content, right? If you think about content right now, we have a 12-month marketing campaign or brand plan, a strategy. You cascade down that content through the regions, and it's hard to actually be super iterative. And I think the constraints were primarily because of compliance and different things that did not allow the industry to move fast enough. I think we are beyond that now. And so where I'm coming from is I think the content side of the industry can be a lot more iterative and a lot faster in creating content. We have what we call 𝗪𝗪𝗦𝗪, which is an AI, so agentic labor, so a solution that will, based on the risk of the material, will get through the approval of medical and legal without human intervention. Okay. So that, and the goal and the statement is quite clear. We think we can reduce the time for MLR by 70% within 5 years.
So MLR, the medical and legal review, which is the critical process.
Which is what it takes to review and approve like promotional content, for example.
Right. So having a MLR accelerated process or enhanced process thanks to AI is one thing. But the point is that if you accelerate the MLR process, you are in virtue of this creating even more content than ever before. And you said it yourself. You said doctors are overwhelmed with information.
They have already too much,
So what is the end goal here?
Yeah. If we don't change the strategy, there is no point being faster in creating more content, right? The only way to solve that is creating more content that is more targeted, right? I take the parallel again with the precision medicine. Where we want to go is targeted therapies and personalized treatment. And this is kind of how we should think about the engagement with the doctors. Can we create smaller content that is addressing one specific need? And so what are the unmet needs of the doctors? And what could be the content that we can create quickly to manage that objection or to address this barrier to adoption treatment, for example?
So that's very clear, and I think that's a good reminder of focusing on quality instead of quantity. You talked about the unmet needs, so I'm tempted to ask you about this because everybody talks about it and obviously has various ways of trying to understand them. But how can we leverage AI to better understand unmet needs that maybe we were assuming for many years without having clear evidence?
Yeah. The answer for Veeva is commercial evidence. So commercial evidence is getting the real context of the interactions at the field and the brand level. And so what does that mean is, I'm going to give you a very specific example. We talked about the brand website with the conversational AI. Now we have the exact narrative and the exact journey of the doctor. We know which questions they asked, why they came on the website, what were their doubts and the responses. And this is something that we could not get until now. This is commercial evidence. If you get the questions of the doctors asking on the website, then you understand where they come from. And that's a big change. The big one we see as well is in the face-to-face interactions between the doctor and the pharma rep. And so what we can do now is capture all that information in our CRM. We call that agentic call report. But the essence is that for anyone that has been in the industry dealing with CRM, they will know that the way we capture information from between the rep and the doctor in the CRM systems has not really changed in the last 20 years, just because compliance was refraining that. I met Dr. Guillaume, we talked about my drug A, and the main topic was about efficacy. What do you do with that? It's hard. It's hard. But the main reason is we couldn't get actually more. Now, actually, we have technologies that are able to understand language, check for compliance based on that language, and derive meaning. And so that's all actually what commercial evidence is. And so very specific examples with our early adopters. We had 65% of the interactions that identified a barrier to adoption treatment. So 65% of interaction identifying barriers to adoption treatment. So it's not anymore Dr. Guillaume talked about efficacy of drug A. Now we know exactly why Dr. Guillaume does not want to prescribe. And that's an information that was there before because it was just the discussion, but it was never in the system, it was never centralized, And therefore, for a company, it never existed, right?
This is, yeah.
And now that's a big, big change because actually, in my view, that's completely changing actually the role of everyone. The role of the rep is not to meet Dr. Guillaume 5 times. The role of the rep is to understand the main barriers to adoption and to work with their managers, with the marketing team on how we address these unmet needs, right?
Interesting.
And so the role of the marketing team, the brand plan is different. Now it's like, okay, we have these 3 main barriers to adoptions. How do we address that, right? We have a better vision on how we need to solve that at the hospital level or at the healthcare organization level. Mm-hmm. So it's changing all the dynamics, and it starts by getting good information.
The way we track performance should also possibly be redesigned, right?
The industry was, and I'm thinking about the field team, the industry was really towards activity-based metrics.
Right, exactly.
Because there was actually not many other ways, right? You have the activities on one side, mm-hmm. you have the sales of your drugs on the other side, but in most countries you don't have the sales at the level of Dr. Guillaume. So we have a bit of triangulation, mm-hmm. and we try to correlate efforts on activities to results on sales. But that's pretty much all what we could do. Now, if you've got more insights from the discussions between a rep and a doctor, you can actually be more outcome driven. And so I'm taking back that, going back to that example I had with the number of calls per day. Now it's going to be more about, okay, how many barriers to adoption treatment are you identifying every week? How many are you solving? And so that's going to be more about outcome driven in terms of HCP sentiment, adoption ladder, probably, which is another big thing, or like barriers to adoption. Yeah. So that's my guess. And what that will mean is, we said it's going to change the role of marketing. It will even change the role of managers, the field level managers, the coaching. All that probably will need to be reconsidered because it's just is a complete different playbook on how we engage with doctors.
Yeah. We talked about the fact that Veeva is a long-standing partner for the industry. But as an organization now, what does it mean from a strategy perspective?
Today we talked about commercial and quickly I talked about CRM. Just to be clear, Veeva is a lot more than a CRM company.
Right.
We do solutions, we do software, AI, data and consulting across the entire industry. Actually, more than half of our revenue is on the drug development side. So solutions for clinical, regulatory, quality management systems. More than actually on the commercial side. Right?
That is very impressive. So you are really helping your customers throughout the entire drug life cycle.
We are actually 85% of new drugs approved were touched by a Veeva solution at some point.
Wow.
Right.
85%.
85% of new drugs, whether it's in the clinical, in the regulatory space, or the commercialization space. So that's a way when we think about Veeva as a long-term industry partner, this is how we think. And long-term is very important to us and to me. What I always shared is it takes 10 to 15 years to develop a drug, from the inception in the lab to like the drug approval. You can't claim to be a partner of the industry if you are geared towards short-term goals, right? You have companies investing billions into a new drug. So we have to take that as well. And so we are always committed to the long-term vision. And so some of the decisions we make, we know might take time, and that's okay because we're here to stay and we're here to help.
Let me be a bit controversial here, because if you touch 85% of the drugs that were launched, let's say last year and so on, I mean, there is a lot to lose when you are leading so strongly, right? Your organization has made a pretty bold move. When was it? 2 years ago now?
3 years ago.
3 years ago, I'm sorry. 3 years ago to change platform, not leveraging on Salesforce platform anymore, having your own and so on. So looking at it as an outsider, I'm thinking this is a pretty bold move. What were the motivations, and tell us a bit more about where you guys are right now?
So we announced that we will move to the Veeva own platform for our CRM solution 3 years ago. Now, this is CRM again. CRM is not Veeva. This is actually now a small portion. And the reality is all the solutions pretty much of Veeva are on the Veeva own Vault platform, not CRM. CRM was the last one.
Okay,
CRM, we are indeed dominant on that market. But the main reason was really about where we think that we can still help is to really bring sales, marketing, medical together. And the only way to get that is to get a full CRM suite that is industry, life science, industry specific. I give you a very specific example. When we announced that we are moving to the Vault platform, so Vault CRM, we also announced Campaign Manager, which is the solution to run campaigns in the industry. This is not an industry agnostic solution. This is just for the industry. And for example, a key thing is the ability to coordinate your field teams as part of your marketing campaign. But what's happening today is that you have different solutions. The marketing team has one solution with one view of Dr. Guillaume. The field rep have a different system with one view of Dr. Guillaume. And then behind the scene, there is that massive effort to combine information of Dr. Guillaume from version A with Dr. Guillaume from version B.
Right.
And so we want to really simplify that, right? The other big thing is we talk about Dr. Guillaume. Dr. Guillaume is a practitioner. You are. But you can also be a principal investigator. You can be involved in clinical trials.
Right.
You can be involved you might have a case of pharmacovigilance. And so it made sense to actually bring everyone into the same Vault platform, where we have now more than 50 applications that support only the life science industry.
Interesting. And a quick disclaimer for those watching us, I am actually not a medical doctor at all. I hear a lot Dr. Guillaume, but it is an unreal persona for the sake of our conversation. One of the promise that I've heard multiple times, if not endless number of times over the last 3 years of AI booming, is that nowadays we are all our own developers. What does it mean for the SaaS? So SaaS, software as a service, which is typically the industry I would imagine that we classify Veeva as part of. What does it mean for you guys as a leading software partner to now seeing your pharma clients to possibly create their own AI solutions by themselves?
You mentioned SaaS, I would segment that a bit more. We have consumer applications and we have enterprise applications. Okay. What we're looking at it now is Veeva is doing enterprise applications. So the client is the entire enterprise.
Of course.
There is a lot of debate on will Gen AI make applications obsolete, right? I do think that enterprise applications are not going away, right? And the reason why is enterprise application, at the end of the day, they are your operating model of your company. Everything is there. This is where your business rules are hard-coded. Your enterprise applications actually coordinate the work of people, right? So I don't think they are going away, but it's clear that they need to evolve, right?
Right.
I had all this speech about the pharma industry has to adapt to engage with humans and with AI. Everyone has to do the same, right? In a way.
For sure.
And that is that. Like enterprise application will use enterprise agents. AI agents will use enterprise application. And these applications now need to coordinate people, but they also need to coordinate agents, right? And so that's, I think, where we're going. It's more about how we make these applications working with both.
That makes a lot of sense. And so as AI has become also the enterprise-grade solution more and more, one of the questions that has been discussed more and more by pharma leaders, but also by procurements and these kind of professionals is the price of AI, because we get a very big buzz and excitement from many professionals and any industry about AI, and then you realize that hold on, I have all these tokens that I'm supposed to pay. So what is your take on that pricing pressure, if not pricing question, and how can we make sure that this truly scales in enterprises? And they can afford it, basically. Yeah,
you're right that it's something that we hear more and more. And again, it's changing very fast. 6 months ago, it was about everyone needs to get on AI, And now it's like, hey, everyone is on AI, but okay, hold on, like there's a cost associated with that. So I'm tempted, Guillaume, to answer with like, it depends. And I'm going to explain a bit more, but it depends also what we mean with AI. Like, for example, I explained that at Veeva, we do 2 types of AI. We do agentic labor, which is really automating something with AI, and human is only involved for escalation, right? There is the agentic MLR, for example, that I explained.
Right.
So it's pretty much full automation. Or you may have AI that is more about helping, driving productivity of a human person. Veeva at heart is still a product company. And so what we do is we have requirements or like problems of the customers, and we design something with one intent in mind, right? And we try to really approach AI this way. So we don't do AI, we do specific agents for specific use cases, or we have agentic labor to address very specific thing. And so from the moment you have the outcome in mind, then it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so one thing that we start pitching is the ROAI, the return on AI. So it's not return on investment, it's return on AI, but it's really to drive that mindset of like, hey, what are the outcomes that you want to drive, and are we able to quantify that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if we get into that direction, then we will still have, let's not neglect that, we'll still have a question on the consumption, but we can relate that consumption to something a bit more tangible.
So Tristan, we touched on a lot of very valuable guidance. The market and the industry is evolving fast. Give me clear takeaways that our audience should take from today's conversation as pharma commercial leaders. What would they be?
I would say 3 things, and they are more like short term. Number 1 is commercial evidence. Get on board with commercial evidence. It's too big to be ignored now, because that will unlock a complete different model of engaging with doctors.
Okay.
Number 2 is content. Is your content ready to be ingested by both the humans and AI? And number 3 is ROAI. So do you have that mindset of outcome first, outcome-driven intent when you build AI, so that you move away from this discussion about consumption only?
Tristan, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I've learned a lot about you, about the industry, about Veeva as well.
Thank you. It was great. Really, thank you.
Thank you all very, very much for watching Amplifiz's podcast. Make sure to subscribe, give us some likes, ask questions. We will be very happy to answer all of them on YouTube. You can also listen to Amplifiz's podcast on Spotify, on Amazon, on Apple, and so on. If you would like to follow Tristan from Veeva, his LinkedIn profile is in the description of this video. Thank you all very much once again, and see you soon. Bye-bye.